Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Giuliano. This is the Asher Marketing Podcast, and our guest this week is Melissa Dunning. Melissa, how you doing?
Terrific. Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. So you just started a new job not too long ago. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. I am the new Director of Marketing at Byrne Apparel, a company that makes workwear, mostly outerwear for men, like coats and overalls, located in Ossian, and they're a terrific company. I'm very pleased to be there.
Well, great. We're going to dive into that in a little more depth, but congratulations on the new gig. And
Thank you.
Back in the office now, or are you still working remotely?
Back in the office.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a chance to meet your new coworkers,
yes.
I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad to be there.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for being here. As you know, and thanks for listening to some other episodes. As you know, we talk about three things: career path, your organization, and that can be organizations, because I know you're involved in some volunteer efforts as well. And then we talk about some of the things you're working on. So I want to start with career path. You mentioned just before we hit record that you grew up in Northwest Indiana and then came to Northeast Indiana, where most of your career has been. I have a similar story. I spent about half my life in Massachusetts, but most of my career has been in Northeast Indiana. So tell us a little bit about where you went, starting with college. How did you decide on a career path, and what did that career path look like at the outset and beyond?
Sure. Well, like you said, I grew up in Northwest Indiana, and my background is actually graphic arts. So I went to commercial art school in Chicago, and then I went into the summary overview is I went into advertising. I worked as an art director at agencies, then moved to Fort Wayne, continued in ad agencies, and transitioned into an account executive, and then transitioned more into marketing. Got a marketing degree along the way at then IPFW.
Yep.
And then went client side. And I worked for Aunt Millie's Bakeries for 17 years in marketing. And now I'm at Byrne Apparel in marketing.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about a couple things. The graphic design world, back when you started your career. I mean, I did a very, very little bit of bad graphic design early in my career because I was sort of a jack of all trades in one of my early jobs, and it was PageMaker 6.5 is what I think I learned graphic design on. But, other guests on the show, Larry Wardlaw is one. We talked about how graphic design used to be typesetting and stuff that's completely unfamiliar to those doing it today. So tell us a little bit about what that world was like.
Yes, that's exactly true, because I'm of the age of a person who started out in graphic design when it was, by hand. Mm-hmm. And I was in art school in the 80s. And when I started my first professional job, that was kind of right before digital or, computer graphics took over everything. So I was on both sides of that divide.
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with other people in the industry about, how the young graphic designers that came up after the Apple revolution and after the computer revolution didn't have the same experience of knowing what hands-on graphic arts was all about, like cutting Rubylith and drawing with rapidograph pens and, using X-Acto knives and so on. And so it was a pretty interesting time and a big challenge. And I think a lot of graphic designers at that time, the stories about like the film industry when they went to sound and some of the actors couldn't adapt to speaking roles. Graphic designers had to either adapt to the Mac environment or you're not going to be a graphic designer anymore. So it was a whole different world.
Yeah, sure. So why did you make the transition from graphic designer to the account side? We had a guest on recently who talked about being on the account side and hating it and rushing back to a world where he was doing more video production. So why did you make that transition, and what was that transition like?
Gosh, I was probably the opposite. Honestly, I was better at being an account executive than a graphic designer. I was a workman-like. I was okay. I wasn't that talented, Anthony, honestly. Well, I think it was just sort of more my nature that I was sort of organized and a planner.
Yeah.
And just as I matured, I also had some mentoring. I was working at HPN Advertising, and Beth Miller was really mentoring to me and taught me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my very, very limited experience in graphic design, one of the things that I was glad that I had that experience is it allows me a little bit to talk to designers and speak a little bit of their language.
Exactly.
I would never claim to know nearly as much as a full-time graphic designer does, but it does help you make that transition,
It does.
I'm sure.
To this day, it helps me working with artists and creatives to this day, I think, being able to speak their language, understand where they're coming from.
Sure. So do you do any graphic design today, or are you completely out of that world?
I can very, very badly occasionally Photoshop something a little,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the artists just laugh at me. But
yeah, I've gotten to the point where if you sit me down in front of InDesign, it still is InDesign, correct? Is that
Yes.
still what our friends in the graphic design world use? InDesign or Photoshop, it's like trying to speak a foreign language to me, and it's so different than...
don't even try.
Yeah, I won't. I'll leave that to the professionals.
Yeah.
So, you've been in marketing in one form or another throughout your entire career. What are some of the changes that have been most impactful that you've seen? There's some obvious ones, but what are some of the things that you look at now and it makes it feel like it's a completely different world?
Gosh, well, e-commerce,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the biggest difference for me in apparel now compared to being in the food industry
Yeah.
up until a year ago, because at Aunt Millie's Bread, we had a lot of digital things going on, but we did not sell product on e-com.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have any way to fulfill, send you a loaf of bread in the mail.
Sure.
So coming to Burn Apparel, we're very strong on our e-commerce, and
Yep.
I work closely with the director of e-commerce, and some areas overlap. There's sort of marketing e-com, and then the overlap between.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting to be able to see exactly every data point and how one little thing that you do can affect. Like you send out an email, and then you see how many people respond to it.
Yeah.
And you can, A/B test subject lines
Sure.
and see how
Sure.
that kind of trackability is a brave new world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way that I've described it to people who work outside of marketing is I say that when I started my career, it was more art than science. And today we've
Yes.
still kept the art, but it's probably more of a science than an art today.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
So for Burn Apparel, well, I want to get more into Burn Apparel in just a minute, but was e-commerce always a strength, or did that evolve over the past 14 months? Obviously, you're fairly new there, so you might not have insight into that, but I'm interested in that impact, how that impacted the business over the past year or so.
More the latter. I think they had a strong framework that they had built or they were building, but then everything just exploded for them,
Yeah.
During pandemic. And then they were fortunate enough to be able to ride that wave and
Yeah.
to really take advantage of that. So now they're trying to grow even more.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
trying to grow.
Yeah. It's still probably reflexive to refer to them as they.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to talk about with your career path, and I know you're a fairly humble person, so you might not want to talk about this much, but I'll drag it out of you, is your receipt of the Silver Medal Award a
Yes,
few
that was
years ago.
that was a very moving honor.
Yeah, so if I have it right, this is the Advertising Federation of Fort Wayne recognizes it's fairly annually, although it's not locked into every year, someone who has made an impact in their career in marketing in one form or another in Northeast Indiana. So tell me a little bit about when you learned you were the recipient of the Silver Medal Award. What was your response? Was it surprising? Did you say it's about time? I've been doing this work all this time.
Yeah, it was very humbling. It was in 2014.
Yeah.
And I actually shared that year with Tom Borney.
Oh, that's right.
He received the silver medal that year as well.
I forgot that you were co-recipients. Yeah.
So it was a very big honor. It was very moving, and tried to keep it humble. And so I always considered the silver medal to be kind of a lifetime achievement award. It's supposed to be given to somebody who has contributed to the advertising industry, their community, and the Advertising Federation. So I was very involved with the Advertising Federation for many years, and I was on the board, and I was president, and I was involved with the district, and it was a big part of my career, so I was very honored by that.
Yeah. Well, and another facet of your career that at least seems to be important based on what LinkedIn tells me is your volunteer efforts. What are you involved with as a volunteer today, and why do you spend your time in that way? I
feel very strongly about volunteering. Currently, I'm involved. I just started on the board of the Allen County Christmas Bureau, and I'm a big sister.
Okay.
And I'm also the president of my neighborhood association, which is less effort than you would think.
Okay. Well,
Don't
I've heard
tell
that
anyone I say
described
that.
as a thankless task, so I'm glad to hear it's less effort than I would think. Yeah.
I know you're good friends with one of my neighbors, so
Who's that?
Chris Stewart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he might
Chris
be saying,
is one of
the
my
president of the neighborhood should always get
Yeah.
on my case. No.
Chris is one of my best friends. We actually served together on the Fort Wayne Trails board. So
Okay, yeah, he's a great guy, a great neighbor.
Well, hopefully he doesn't annoy you too much with
No,
his
he's
requests.
the best.
Okay,
He's
good.
the best. So those are the only things I'm doing right now. I'm not doing extensive volunteer work, but I have been involved in the past in a lot of arts organizations, Cinema Center, the ballet, the art museum, and I just strongly feel that it's a win-win-win to be involved as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Number one, you're helping your community, of course. Number two, I think it really helps you with your own personal and professional development.
Yep.
Because you can do things for boards or for committees that maybe you wouldn't be doing in your career, or do them first. Like, for example, I did a lot of public speaking with the Advertising Federation before I ever did it in my job.
Yeah.
Or I did a lot of event planning.
Yep.
And number three, networking. You know, you'll meet people that you wouldn't have met otherwise,
Yep.
and they can become, great networking and referral sources, and people who become friends and connections for your whole career, your
Yeah,
whole life.
I agree with that 100%. Last night I was talking to a group of young aspiring entrepreneurs, and I was talking about, the shortcut that you can take when people, a lot of times younger people say, well, how do you get 3 to 5 years of experience if every job wants you to have 3 to 5 years of experience? And I said, one of the few shortcuts you can take is volunteer in a way that allows you to showcase the skills you want to be known for.
100%,
So, yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and that's something it's great to see that you've done that, and I think anyone who has done it knows the benefits of it, but it sometimes isn't obvious to those who maybe aren't yet starting their careers. So let's talk a little bit more about Byrne Apparel. I will admit I know a little bit about the company, but not much. So anything you can tell me will be new to me for the most part. Tell us a little bit about the company's history, its primary focuses, and what you think makes it different and better perhaps than some of its competitors.
Okay. Well, it's been around for over 100 years. The company and it's family owned, still family owned. It was started in Byrne, Indiana, and it's now in Ossian. And the company provides workwear to hardworking people,
Yep.
largely outerwear for men, like coats and overalls. It's a competitor to, a lot of people know Carhartt, but for a more affordable price. So it's a really great brand promise. It's an excellent brand promise to have, same quality of product as the big national brands, but at a better price.
Yep.
So it's a great position to be in. And I'll tell you, I hadn't heard of them. They're kind of quiet.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know who they are. And when the recruiter called me about this position, he said, "Have you heard of Byrne Apparel?" I said, "No." And he said, well, they're a great company, a great group of people. And I thought, yeah, everybody says stuff like that,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I found out pretty quick they really are a great company, a great group of people. So I'm very pleased to be there. They really take care of their people. They do things the right way. They have, strong values. I mean, just in my first couple of weeks there, I was working directly with my boss, who's the VP of Sales and Marketing, to
Yep.
catch up on some social media questions and comments from customers. And they had gotten a little behind because of people leaving.
Sure.
And, of course, we have a 1-year warranty on products. We had a guy who was complaining that a pair of overalls that he had had for 10 years had a button fall off. And my boss immediately said, "Replace them. We'll replace them."
Wow.
And I was just really impressed that they will stand behind their product even after 10 years.
Wow.
They're really good to people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's
great to see.
Yeah. So is there any industry that Byrne Apparel specializes in? Is there any line of clothing? Is there anything that is distinct, or is it pretty much what you would expect across the board for workwear?
I'm just still learning the apparel industry. And I think there are kind of standard selections of outerwear and insulated, but not only does our product line it might have like more features and benefits than a national brand, like, some inside pockets that hold a carpenter pen,
Yeah.
a pencil, and And again, at a more affordable price.
Yeah.
We also have a selection of, jeans and T-shirts and shorts and hats and, gloves and all kinds of things. And my husband's looking through a catalog going, ooh, I want one of those and I want one of those. I didn't know you had that.
Well, I will claim to know less than zero about fashion, but it's always surprising to me when brands like Carhartt take off with people who probably haven't done an honest day's work in their life. Do you see any of that? Is there any, do you have customers who just like the brand and don't really use it for its intended purpose?
We'll take it. You don't have to be a construction worker.
Yeah.
If you just want to wear one of our coats, we'll be happy to sell one to you.
So what about markets? Is it a product that's primarily domestic? Is it all over the world? Where do you sell to customers?
United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we do sell in retail in stores like Rural King or Tractor Supply Company. Yep. And then our e-commerce through burndirect.com and through Amazon. So Amazon is a whole other ball game that I'm learning too.
Yeah, sure. So what's that been like? I'm fascinated by this and curious, maybe for selfish reasons. I have no intention anytime soon of going and doing something else, but I've been at Asher for 17 years, about the same amount of time you were at Millie's, and it's terrifying and fascinating to me at the same time, thinking of the prospect of learning a completely new industry. What's that been like?
It's been like drinking out of a fire hose while trying to stand up in a whirlwind during a hurricane or something.
That's a lot of metaphors combined.
Okay, that was a mess. But it's been exciting though, because my goal when I was job searching was I wanted to find something where I could really use my experience. I have a lot of years of experience, but also continue to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm really achieving that, and work for a company that's doing some good work and a good company. So I feel very fortunate to be achieving all those goals.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, I'm glad it's a positive, because like I said, it somewhat terrifies me, the thought if I had to ever do it myself. What are let's talk about some of the projects you're working on. I would imagine that the thing that's taking up most of your time is learning a new industry and learning about the company. And what are some specific things you're focused on as you seek to get to know the company a little better?
I'm working on sort of two big categories of things right now. One is a branding analysis, and of course, so I'm doing a big branding review of all the on-product branding, and I really strongly feel that in branding, my definition of branding is everything matters. Mm-hmm. Of course, I stole that from Starbucks, so only steal from the best. So just really trying to analyze every touch point of the brand. And they really do have a good, strong, solid brand and consistency. But just, where are we with it? Does it need to be revised at all? And the other big thing we're trying to work on is a brand awareness campaign. Because the company has got just about everything going for it except for brand awareness.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a great product line. We've got a great distribution system. We've got an excellent e-commerce framework in place and retailer, situation in place. And we've got really good brand loyalty from existing customers. But the one thing that we don't have is strong brand awareness. So I'm thinking that if we can launch some brand awareness campaigns to get people to know who we are and recognize who we are, it could really help. And we're even trying to increase our brand awareness here in Northeast Indiana. I mean, even a lot of people in Northeast Indiana don't know who we are. So we're doing some things like we're doing a tree in the Embassy Festival of Trees this year. Never done that before.
Sure.
We're having a display created for the Fantasy of Lights.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to maybe look at some other, just company reputation management and PR, just sending out an occasional press release and saying, we're here, here's what we're doing.
Yeah, so I suspect it wasn't intentional that it's been a quiet company. What do you think is the reason for that? Any insight into that?
I think modesty.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I definitely didn't grow up with on the East Coast, and moving to Northern Indiana, I see a lot of it in a corporate and in a business sense. One of the people I talk to frequently is Andrew Booth at MedPro, and he talked about the fact that MedPro didn't even have a sign in front of the building for years, and some of it was that humility and we don't want to make too much of a fuss.
Yes,
so,
draw attention to ourselves. I mean, for example, the company donates a lot of coats to different organizations, especially at maybe, the rescue mission at holiday time and so on, but nobody knows it.
Yeah.
And they feel like, well, if we bragged about that, that's just not right. We shouldn't be bragging about that. So, well, it's not bragging. I mean, so trying to put ourselves forward and just say we're here.
Yeah. Well, and it's a little bit of low-hanging fruit, hopefully, for you, some things that you did for a number of years and now have the chance to do for another company. Is there anything that surprised you or has surprised you as you've gotten to know the company and its people? Anything that you didn't know going in that maybe you expected something different?
Oh, gosh. Well, they have some fun. So that's rewarding.
Yeah.
They have nice offices. They just remodeled their offices. But they have, I hope they won't mind me telling these stories, but they have Beer 30 every Friday, where they basically stop working at 3 o'clock and start drinking beer.
Yeah.
And they have, the haircuts for employees. And they have a nacho cheese alarm that goes off when they make nacho cheese.
Oh, wow.
So they've got a lot of personality and fun.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds like it. Well, that's always a good thing. It makes it a little easier to go to work every day.
I said you have to gain like 10 pounds when you start working here because everybody's constantly eating nacho cheese and everybody's bringing in donuts all the time.
Well, they're trying to sell you new clothes. So if you gain some weight, you go up a size and then,
That's a good strategy.
There you go. So obviously that's a lot, learning a new company and working on branding. Is there anything else that is on your plate that's substantial, that's either keeping you up at night or getting you excited or maybe a little bit of both?
Oh, gosh. Well, I just started volunteering with the Allen County Christmas Bureau. So I'm trying to learn that organization.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about it. I think some people will know that organization, but others may not be familiar with it.
It is an organization that has been around for a number of years, and they match donors with families in need at Christmas time, and they get people to adopt a family. And I don't have all the, the brand story down here quite yet, but I think it was something like 350 families last year that they served. And I helped with the donation process in the warehouse, and it was amazing. How many gifts and donations came in and out of there. I mean, just like dozens and dozens of bicycles, for example.
Yeah.
So this year, right now, they're looking for a space to do their fulfillment in November 30th through December 3rd or whatever it's going to be. So if anybody listening knows of a warehouse with 2 dock doors and space that can be used for 3 or 4 days, please get in touch with the Allen County Christmas Bureau because we need a space this year.
All right. So everybody listen up. And if you know of that, reach out to me or Melissa and we'll get that problem solved. So how did you get involved with that organization? Was it a personal passion? Was it related to your work at Byrne Apparel? How did that come together?
I had been a donor. I had just, donated to them. And then I had some time. I was able to volunteer. So I just sort of stepped up the volunteering there. And then they invited me. Now, I mean, you're involved with Fort Wayne Trails and lots of other organizations too. So you're definitely have that volunteer mindset as well. And I admire that.
Well, yeah, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier, when and again, kind of referencing something I talked about with the group I was speaking to last night. When I started my career, I was always thrilled to be asked and felt like I had to say yes when I was asked to serve on a board or a committee. But what ended up happening is I ended up serving on some volunteer efforts that I really wasn't all that passionate about, and it showed. I didn't really contribute as much as I should have or could have. Later in life, I said, hey, I'm still going to feel honored if somebody asks, but I'm going to be selective in where I give my time. And I'm really fortunate that, my volunteer time is pretty much all Fort Wayne Trails and Indiana Tech, 2 organizations I have a great relationship with and a lot of affinity for. So, the passion kind of just comes naturally when you care about the organization. So I know a lot about that, and sounds like you've got the same advantage with the Christmas Bureau.
Yeah, they're a good organization.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to switch now to the speed round of the show, where we talk about some of the things we've already discussed, but in a more concise way, if you will. So, you've made a career change that, came after a long stint with one employer, but it's not the first career change you've ever made. You've also changed what you do a number of different times, although all within the realm of marketing. You went from graphic designer to account executive to client-side marketer. What is your best piece of career advice? In other words, when you think about what you've learned about building a career, if somebody was asking your advice about how do you build a career path successfully, what would you say?
Oh, gosh. That's a good question. I don't know that a lot of my choices were planned, exactly.
Sure.
But I think I would give two pieces of advice. One is do volunteer work, which I already talked about why that's important. And number two, my life motto is, and how it has always been, try a little harder.
Yeah.
So that's what I would tell them. Try a little harder, which it sounds like a lot of work, like slave driving.
Yeah.
But I don't mean just working a little harder, because yes, it is working a little. Like if you're an art director, don't just show 2 ideas, show 3. If you're writing a marketing plan, don't just check your facts, double check your facts. But it also means trying a little harder to understand somebody else's point of view, or trying a little harder to improve a relationship. So try a little harder. Even silly little things like, sometimes I think, does this blouse need to be ironed? Yeah, try a little harder. It needs to be ironed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great advice and unique from, I think, what any of our past guests has said. And I like that a lot. I mean, one of the things I've learned as I've gotten a little older is I don't always, and those of you who know me will back this up, I don't always live by it, but I do believe that you always want to leave situations knowing you gave your best effort, whether that is a relationship or whether it is your work. It takes less time because you don't churn as much about all the things you could have done or should have done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, really good advice. All right. Second one, this is probably something that's fresh in your head because of the work you do. But if you were trying to capture the Byrne Apparel brand in a phrase, something concise, if somebody stopped you and said, hey, this new place you work, tell us about it, and you've got 30 seconds, 60 seconds, what would you say?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm trying to learn the elevator speeches. They come pretty naturally, but the company's tagline is "Let's get to work," and we've got big signs on the walls that say "Let's get to work," and it certainly fits with my approach.
Sure.
And it fits with workwear.
Yeah.
But our mission statement is that we supply workwear to hardworking Americans that's made right, made to work, and made affordable.
Ah, okay.
So
that's pretty
it's one of those mission statements that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well,
I know I've heard you say that you don't like mission statements.
I don't like a lot of mission statements because, that's a good one. I would hold that up as a model for what they should do.
It's pretty good. It's right on, I think.
Yeah. Well, and the flaw that I find with most mission statements is they're very well intentioned, but what ends up happening is they're written by committee, and all these well-intentioned people kind of have the word that they insist be in the mission statement, or they want to move the comma to a certain place. And it ends up, there are pieces that work well for everyone, but the whole doesn't work all that great. But I really like that one. Could you give that to me again? I want to hear it again.
We supply workwear to hardworking Americans that is made right, made to work, and made affordable.
All right. Well, that was a test, and you got it right. So there you go.
It's a good one.
Yeah. No, that's really good because it's descriptive, and it is portable where it'll mean the same thing to multiple people while also being very, very specific, which I like.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And it's not like you were saying. My new boss says people buy their words at Costco in bulk. Yeah, for sure. Well, and the flaw, I think, with many mission statements is after hearing them, you don't know any more than you did coming into the conversation. But in that case, it really, I think that's a great position to have. Yeah.
So good for you, Byrne Apparel. Great job.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then the final question is related to everything that's been going on for the past 14 months. When we started this podcast, it was a byproduct of the pandemic where we were trying to do some new things at a time when we were forced into some innovation, but also had the opportunity to do some new things. And when we started the podcast, we were talking to people about resilience, and we still need a lot of that in the world. But as we're coming out of the pandemic, we've changed the question to what you've learned over the past 14 months. What is something that you took away from the last year or so that you think will stick with you and that you think is worth sharing with others?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. Well, the unique situation for me was that, I was job searching during the pandemic, and
Yeah.
it was the first time I had been job searching in 17 years.
Yeah.
And it was so, and it's not really pandemic related exactly what I learned from that, but except for it was even more challenging to be job searching in a pandemic than, I mean, it was all, Zoom interviews and so
Yeah.
on. But this is kind of ironic to say, but I had to learn how to tell my story. I had to learn how to define my brand and tell my story.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to do that.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm in marketing. How can I not know how to
Yeah.
communicate my brand? But I just hadn't done it in so long. And I was a little modest and didn't want to tell my story. So anybody who's job searching, that's my number one piece of advice, is learn how to tell your story. In a succinct way. I mean, like just a little examples. An interviewer might ask me a question like, how many people were on your team? And in the beginning, I would get kind of tongue-tied. I'd be going, well, I had 5 people, but then 1 left, and then I had this, and then I had,
Yeah.
over time, these
Yeah.
things happen. But then, after a little time went by, I learned to say, well, I led a team of 5 people,
Yeah.
and I had this and I had that. You
Yeah.
just have to learn to tell your story.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's for those of us who work in any facet of communication, I think it's way easier to help someone else tell their story than it is to tell your own story.
Maybe
And
that's part of it, yeah.
that's something that, we talk about at Asher all the time is we do a really great job of bringing brands to life and helping them tell their stories. And sometimes we forget to tell our own story in
Yeah.
the process. I think that's true for us as individuals too. It's way easier to, point the camera at someone else and draw their story out than it is to, decide what our story is.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can totally get that.
Yeah. So anything, I'll ask you one more question. Is there anything you learned through the challenge of job search during a pandemic that, if someone might experience as the world of work changes that you think is worth knowing?
Oh my gosh. Well, I certainly learned a lot about myself. And, people would ask me too questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And, what are you looking for? And I would think, I don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it made me reflect on those things for myself and what's
Yeah.
important to me. And I came to some good conclusions. And so it was a really good reflection and growth opportunity for myself as well.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you've landed at a great place. That's a good match for your
I
skills.
feel very fortunate. in
Yeah,
that way.
well, congratulations on that for sure, and thanks for giving us some of your time. I know you're busy learning a new company and a new industry, so I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and share your story as we both figure out what our stories are.
Thanks so much for having me, Anthony. It's really enjoyable. I should have brought you a coat from Burn Apparel. I'll send you one.
All right, that sounds great. That sounds great, and I'll try not to eat the nacho cheese and upsize myself. So, well, thanks, Melissa, and thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this week's podcast. We'll be back next week with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.